Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. As you guys may have noticed, I am growing out my beard here. But I promise I'm the same person. Nothing's changed. It's just probably going to get longer over the next month or 2 months or so. So today I wanted to talk about stress. I know, this is something that I hear all the time from people is, oh my God, I'm so stressed out by work, right? And like, obviously there's a question of what do you do about that? But in the meantime, how do you cope with that? What are the results that happen, right, because of that stress? So, first off, I'm going to lead off. Stress is basically an unavoidable part of life, in some degree, right? Obviously, there are things you can do to make it less. There are things that you can do to make it more. Anybody who's telling you you can go through life without stressing at all, if you just buy their one secret special sauce or whatever, is full of crap. Um, there are ways to dissolve a lot of it. There are ways to mitigate it. There are ways to, not have it hurt you as much. And yes, theoretically, at some point, if you become a very, very, very enlightened, evolved person, it is possible to more, to not experience it. But those people are literally 1 in 100 million. So, it's like winning the lottery, right? And it involves like decades and decades and decades of a lot of spiritual work. But so the point is if there's going to be stress, right? How do you reduce it, and how do you not have it? How do you manage it in a healthy way, right? So obviously the first thing you want to do is reduce as much of your stress as possible. So if you're not living your purpose in your career, or if you're struggling to execute, like maybe you're living your purpose and you're making, $20,000 a year or $30,000 a year because you're living your purpose, but you're not executing efficiently, obviously those things are going to contribute to a lot of stress. When you get into a point where you're doing something that you love and you're making good money doing it, then 90+% of the stress disappears. So that's obviously like the first thing I'm going to recommend. But in the meantime, while you're in the position you're in and as you make that journey, how do you cope with that stress in an effective way? So we're going to take a look at the 4 unhealthy methods that people use to cope with stress. We're going to talk about why those are a problem and how that, plays out, just so you can recognize them in your life. And then we're going to talk about 2 methods that you can use that are healthy that actually will allow you to use stress in a positive way or to remove it from your life. So the first unhealthy method is lashing out. So a lot of people don't do this. I mean, there are some people who do, but this is when you directly snap back at your boss, at your colleagues, at your clients, whatever, right? It's pretty rare because most people won't tolerate it for very long, if at all. And most people know that their bosses and their companies and their clients are just going to tell them, you're fired, go stick it, etc. if they come at them really, really, really angry. But when people do get too burned out, they often lose control entirely. I mean, like when I was at BCG, I literally told the partner who was, working us hard to go fuck herself. I got away with that because I was very good at my job. But after I did that 2 more times, I didn't get away with it anymore. But even then, I know a guy who did that and he got fired on the first time. I had a lawyer once, right, who snapped at me, came at me because I was following up on the status of something. And, that definitely has affected the professional relationship. And I'm definitely not going to be doing more work with that person. So, that's something where, lashing out is not productive, but people do end up there. So the second method is passive aggressiveness. So this is one that I see a lot. So people are too afraid to lash out directly. They're too afraid to openly express their anger. So they do it subtly. They like undermine the company in these weird, like hidden ways. So they'll like dawdle on tasks, something they're supposed to do, and they just like won't do it until like the last minute or not at all. They'll like ignore details in documents. They'll come up with excuses for why they can't do things. They won't be honest about important stuff. I mean, even some people, they'll steal office supplies. I mean, they'll steal like staplers and pens or something, which is, I know that sounds mind-boggling, but it's kind of this like channel to get their stress out. Now, obviously this won't result in your boss bringing the hammer down as fast as lashing out will, but people will notice eventually if you're mailing it in, and they will notice that something's wrong, right? So they won't be able to identify specific actions, but humans are intuitive creatures, right? And their gut will tell them that something is not right, that something is off, right? So when you're in that state, you can forget getting raises and promotions. this passive aggressiveness it's the slow walk to the chopping block, and it's an easy way to be at the top of the list when it's time for layoffs, right? So the third unhealthy method of coping with stress is transference. So often people become so dependent on their jobs that they manage to avoid manifesting their stress at their job at all, right? And then what happens though is a lot of this time it's there, they got to do something, right? It overflows onto their husbands, onto their wives, onto their children, onto their friends, right? And this can destroy friendships. It can poison relationships. It can stop you from being the best parent you can be. And I've had a couple people come on the calls and say, I got divorced because of this. So obviously transference is not a healthy method. So the last unhealthy method is bottling it up. So some people manage to avoid letting the stress overflow in their personal lives as well as their career lives, right? Now, that's an issue because what happens is they just bottle it up inside and they just battle their inner demons in silence for their whole lives, right? And they just keep it the secret war that they're fighting that they can't talk about, that they don't tell anyone about. And it's a painful, lonely existence. Because even though they may seem to have social connections, they don't really feel connected because nobody knows what they're experiencing. No one knows what's going on. And they just keep it to themselves and suffer and suffer and suffer, right? And so these people are the most at risk of catastrophic health issues. So, heart attacks and strokes are obviously the most commonly recognized stress-induced ones. Two ones that people don't realize are often stress-related are gut inflammation. So, irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, all these kinds of things where they may have to remove part of your colon. But so that the whole gastrointestinal thing just disintegrates under stress. And then another one is cancer. There's a huge element of stress in cancer. So if you're bottling it up and you're not letting it out, then you're putting yourself at tremendous health risk. So those are the unhealthy methods. So what can you do to cope with stress, right? How do you avoid falling into these traps? So here are some alternatives. So the first one is to turn the pain into power. So develop a plan to actually change the situation that you're in, right? Don't say, hey, I'm going to be here for the next 10 or 20 years, so I guess we'll just deal with it and suffer. Come up with a plan to change it, right? And then once you have that plan, commit to that plan, right? Now, when I say commit, right, decide is the word for decide comes from I think it comes from Latin, but it means to cut off from. It means to say, hey, listen, this is going to happen one way or another. So commitment is when you say, I am not going to allow this to continue. This isn't like, hey, at some point it's going to change. It's, hey, I am taking action every day to make this different and to get out of this hell, right? It's a very it's a very powerful emotion. It's not kind of a laissez-faire, it would be nice kind of thing, right? So commit to that plan and then use every irritation, every source of stress as motivation to make progress on that plan, right? So human beings naturally tend to procrastinate and they tend to be complacent. That's just the natural human tendency, right? So if you set up a situation where stress serves as the feedback mechanism to take action on your plan, then every time it gets bad, you get a little bit farther away from there. Every time it gets bad, you get a little bit closer to making things happen that are going to change it, right? So what that does is it puts a limit on the amount of pain that you're going to endure, and it moves you towards a brighter future. Because at some point, after enough stress, every time, if you take action, every time you're stressed and it spurs you to do a little bit, and more and more and more, then you're not going to be there anymore. You're going to be done, right? And then you're going to be on that brighter future. So then you're not going to sit around there for 20 years. You're going to be gone in 1, right? 2, maybe, right? If you're really slow and really inefficient, you'll be gone in 4, right? But you'll be somewhere better, right? So that's the first healthy method. Now, the second healthy method is to dissolve the stress. And I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about, being really spiritually enlightened and all this kind of stuff. So this is not the same as bottling up stress. And a lot of people get the two confused. There are a lot of people, especially people in the spiritual arena, who just don't acknowledge their stress. They just pretend like they don't have it. And they're like, oh, no, I'm just give my give my stress up to God or spirit or universe or whatever. But that's not really true. They're just ignoring it, and they think that they are dissolving it. So you got to be really, really, really careful about this one. Dissolving stress is when you confront it openly in your mind and you defeat it. This is not the same as ignoring it. This is not the same as running from it. This is not the same as hiding from it. This is not the same as denying it or pretending that it isn't there. This isn't the same as escaping from it with booze or addictions or whatever, right? Most people will just bury stress, and they think that it's the same thing as dissolving it because it's moved from their conscious minds to their unconscious minds and then into their bodies. And it will actually affect your cellular structure. So really dissolving stress is actually a very difficult thing to do. It's something that does involve a great deal of self-vigilance and self-awareness. It's a huge component of a practice that I call psychohacking that I teach to all of my students. And if you do it long enough, then you will, it will eventually, you'll start doing it before it even manifests into stress. So like once you get really, 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 really good at it, then not only can you dissolve any stress that comes up, but as the stress starts to arise, you can cut it really quickly. I mean, I'm not going to be here and tell you that like I never stress, because that would be a lie. But I do stress a lot less than most people because of this practice. And it's something that I've taught to other people, and it's made their lives a lot better. So yes, Don is somebody who is learning this right now. So, okay, guys. So that is psychohacking. That is dissolving the stress. Super powerful. So, okay, guys, so if you've been using any of those 4 unhealthy methods, right, which were lashing out, passive aggressiveness, transference, or bottling it up, if you've been using those methods to cope with stress, now you know what to look for. Now you know what to stop doing, right? More importantly, you know that the way out of those traps, right? And the way to get out of those 4 is to use the 2 healthy methods. So you take action on a plan that's going to change the situation, and you dissolve the stress for real. Those are the 2 methods that will actually allow you to cope with the stress in a healthy way and avoid those other 4 that are going to cause damage to your careers and your relationships and your health, right? So now if you need help actually putting together that plan, or if you need to learn how to dissolve stress for real, because most people don't know how to do that, then I am here to help, right? So you can go to this link, www.oculusinstitute.com/scheduling. You can book a call with me. We can talk about it. We can talk about what's going on in your career. We can get clear on, how bad things are. We can get clear on, what would an endpoint look like. We can talk about what's going to be involved, what you're going to have to do, and, planning and all that other kind of stuff, right? And we can talk about the stress. We can talk about, what's going on internally and what's going to happen for you to move beyond that and all that kind of stuff. So I look forward to chatting with you guys. I do hope you enjoyed the little message today, and I will talk to you all soon. Farewell.